You have no savings, no rich uncle, and a job that already eats your whole day. Some of the most profitable products in American history were ideas that sounded genuinely stupid. One of them was a rock in a cardboard box. Another was a blanket worn backwards. And another was a plastic fish that sings. People with money and contacts looked at those things and passed. People with almost nothing did not pass and got rich. Meanwhile, you are still waiting for a good idea, and good ideas never arrive on schedule. So let's close the doors that are actually closed. You are not opening a restaurant. You are not developing property, and you are not starting a bank or drilling for oil. That takes family money, and you know it. What is left is 10 dumb ideas that worked, and they are ranked from the one everybody already quotes at parties to the one with the lowest cost of entry on the whole list. And at the end, there is one woman who started with $5,000 and a pair of scissors. If you want to copy what she did in her first week, then you can do it before Sunday. So the first one, and you knew it was coming, is the pet rock. In 1975, an advertising copywriter named Gary Dahl sold ordinary beach stones as pets. Each stone came in a small cardboard carrying box with air holes and a bed of straw. Inside was a joke manual about training your rock to sit and stay. The rock did nothing, which means the box and the joke were the product. Dahl used smooth stones reported to come from a Mexican beach, and they were bought for pennies each. He designed the carrying box and wrote the training manual himself. Then he showed the finished thing at a gift show in San Francisco in August of that year. So his first buyers were not shoppers at all. They were gift shop and department store buyers placing wholesale orders before the holidays. Press coverage did the rest, because reporters could not resist the story. Reports from that period put the retail price at $3.95. There was never an audited public figure for how many sold, so treat the big numbers as press reporting. And what that means for you is that he was selling a cheap laugh at the exact moment people needed a gift. Licensing on a rock is close to nothing, but if you call any product a toy for children, then you are under the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which means safety testing and hazard labels. Now the trap. A fad does not fade out slowly, and instead it drops off all at once. Sales died right after the season, and the copycats were stuck with stock nobody wanted. The people who survive this take the money and stop. The people who lose it reorder. A rock is dumb, but a rock is at least inert on purpose. The next one was a factory accident that nobody meant to sell at all. Second is the Slinky, which is just a metal spring that walks downstairs. In 1943, a mechanical engineer named Richard James was working at a Philadelphia shipyard. He was testing tension springs meant to steady instruments on ships at sea. One fell off a shelf and tumbled end over end across the floor. His wife Betty found the word Slinky in a dictionary and named it. They sold a bare coil of steel as a toy and moved hundreds of millions of them. The build was simple. James borrowed about $500, had a machine coil flat steel wire, and boxed it. And what that means for you is that the entire product was one part, and it had no electronics and no assembly line. The first paying customers came from a demonstration table at the Gimbels department store in Philadelphia in November of 1945. He walked the spring down a small ramp in front of shoppers. Reports say the first batch of about 400 sold out in roughly 90 minutes. Fifth is the Snuggie, which is the fleece blanket with sleeves. It is a bathrobe worn backwards, and that is the design. Scott Boylan and his company All-Star Products Group sold it with a cheap infomercial starting in 2008. The product was not even new. A sleeved blanket called the Slinky, made by Gary Clegg, came first. The Snuggie won on advertising. The work here is almost boring. Cut fleece, sew wide sleeves, pick one price, and then shoot a low-budget infomercial and buy a lot of late-night airtime. Orders came in by phone and website while the ads were running. Press coverage at the time reported over 20 million Snuggies sold in the first stretch. The offer was around $20 plus shipping, and you got 2 of them. Those figures come from news reports and company statements, and they are not audited filings. And what that means for you is that the profit lived entirely inside the gap between the ad cost and the order value. If ads get more expensive, then that business dies quietly. On the legal side, textiles need fiber content and country of origin labeling under Federal Trade Commission rules. Flammability standards are separate, and they sit with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. The trap is that a blanket with sleeves has no protection at all. Copycats arrived quickly and cut the price. The ones who survive that own the brand name people search for, and they do not own the pattern. So far, every winner needed cheap goods and heavy advertising. The next man skipped the advertising and manufactured something else entirely, which was scarcity. Sixth is Beanie Babies. They were small, bean-filled, plush animals with a heart-shaped tag. Ty Warner sold them cheap, and then he deliberately kept supply tight and retired designs on purpose. Buyers came to believe the toys would be worth a fortune later. Warner got extremely rich. Most collectors did not. The method matters more than the toy. Warner refused to sell through the big chain stores. He supplied small, independent gift shops in limited quantities, so shelves ran empty. Then he announced that certain animals were retired for good. And what that means for you is that he was manufacturing the fear of missing out, one shop at a time. Forbes reported Warner as a billionaire during that run, and that is the most solid single fact here. Peak revenue numbers float around unverified, and I would not quote them. There is also a documented ending. In 2013, Warner pleaded guilty to federal tax evasion over money held in a Swiss account. He paid a civil penalty and got probation rather than prison. Plush toys today need children's product safety testing and proper labeling, and any real business needs to report its income. The trap here is an ethical one. The scarcity was real marketing. The promise of future value was not, and nobody sensible should make that promise. Collectors who bought as an investment lost money when the bubble popped. Copy the limited release. Never copy the suggestion that your customers will get rich by holding your product. The next one did the same scarcity trick without any of the sophistication. It was rubber bands, sold to children, and for about 1 school year, it was a currency. Seventh is silly bands, which are the rubber bands shaped like animals. They are silicone bands molded into shapes that snap back when you take them off your wrist. Shaped silicone bands existed in Japan first. An Ohio businessman named Robert Croak built a thicker version for American kids and pushed it hard around 2009. Children wore 20 at a time and traded them at school. Then it stopped, almost overnight. The playbook was cheap. Order silicone bands in shapes from a manufacturer, package them in small themed packs, and sell them for a few dollars a pack. Then place them in independent toy stores and candy shops near schools, and not in big chains. And what that means for you is that the distribution was chosen so kids would see them on other kids first. There is no audited sales figure for silly bands, and there are only reports of millions of packs at the peak. So skip the number and keep the mechanism. The product spread school to school for free because trading requires a second child. Anything aimed at children 12 and under falls under the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, which means third-party testing and hazard labeling. Now the trap. Crazes crash faster than you can reorder. The people who made money sold hard and got out. The people who lost money bought a container load at the peak because sales were still climbing when they signed. Every idea so far needed a factory somewhere. The next one started with a man gluing a homemade lump of plastic onto the back of his own phone. Eighth is PopSockets, which is the little plastic knob you stick on the back of a phone. It expands like a tiny accordion so you can grip your phone with one finger. David Barnett is a philosophy professor at the University of Colorado, and he started building them by hand around 2010. People called it pointless. It's sold by the tens of millions. Follow the order of what he did because this is the most copyable path yet. He had a personal annoyance, which was tangled earbud cords. He glued 2 buttons to the back of a phone case as a crude fix, and then he kept redesigning it. He sold early units himself, ran a crowdfunding campaign, and used that to pay for real manufacturing. Then he filed patents. The first paying customers came from his own direct sales, and that was long before Amazon shelves or phone accessory chains mattered. The patent step was not optional. Press reports have put PopSockets' annual revenue in the hundreds of millions of dollars at its peak. That is journalism about a private company, and it is not a public filing, so hold the exact figure loosely. And what that means for you is that a knob of plastic worth that much will be copied within weeks. Barnett had patents and used them against copycats. The knockoffs had nothing to defend. Legally, you need whatever license and tax registration your state requires, but the real work here is intellectual property. If your product is one simple shape, then the patent and the brand name are the only fence you own. The trap is falling in love with how easy the product is to make. If it is easy for you, then it is easy for a stranger in a factory. The survivors file early, register the name, and build a brand people ask for by name. Barnett still had to mold plastic and ship boxes. The next man shipped nothing at all. He had no product, no inventory, and no factory. And he had just one web page and one joke. Ninth is the $1 million homepage, and this is the cheapest thing on the list to start. In 2005, a 21-year-old English student named Alex 2 built a single web page containing 1 million pixels. A pixel is one dot on a screen. He sold them to advertisers for $1 each, in blocks of 10 by 10. So the smallest purchase anyone could make was $100. Buyers got a tiny logo linking to their website, and he promised to keep the page online for 5 years. He registered a domain, paid for basic hosting, and built the page himself. He sold the first blocks to friends and family, which gave the page something to show. Then he sent the story to journalists, because a student trying to sell 1 million pixels is a story. Coverage brought buyers, and buyers filled the grid, and the filling grid became the next story. The final total was widely reported at $1,037,100. The last block of pixels was auctioned on eBay to get there. And what that means for you is that his startup cost was a domain name and hosting, and nothing else. He had no product, no staff, and no supplier. There is almost no licensing on a website. But if you did this in the United States, then the money would be ordinary taxable business income. The Internal Revenue Service treats self-employment income as taxable, and you would owe self-employment tax on top of income tax. Now the trap, said honestly. It worked once, and it will not work again in that form. Dozens of copycat pixel pages failed, because the joke was already spent. The transferable part is that he sold a limited, visible, filling grid, and he let the press do his advertising for free. But he still charged from day one. The last one on this list did the opposite. They gave the entire product away, deliberately, and they still built one of the biggest independent game businesses in the country. 10th is Cards Against Humanity. It is a party card game where players answer a prompt with the worst possible card in their hand. A group of high school friends from Highland Park, Illinois, wrote it for their own New Year party. Max Timken is the name you will see most often, but it was a group and it was not one founder. Then they published the whole game as a free file anybody could print at home. Follow the order carefully because the order is the strategy. First, they wrote the cards, which cost nothing but time. Second, they released a free print-and-play file under a Creative Commons license. That license let people copy and share it legally as long as they were not selling it. Third, once people were actually playing and telling friends, they ran a crowdfunding campaign to pay for a printed boxed version. The campaign asked for $4,000 and raised roughly $15,000. That is a public page anybody can go and read, which is why I am willing to quote it. And what that means for you is that their customers paid for the first print run before a single box existed. They took no loan and risked no inventory. Crowdfunding costs money, though. Kickstarter's published rates take 5% of what you raise, and then payment processing of about 3% and a small fee per pledge. Later revenue for the company is private, and the figures reported in the tens of millions are outside estimates, so hold those loosely. The first paying customers were crowdfunding backers who were already fans because they had played the free version. After that, it was direct online sales and retail. On paperwork, you need your local license and tax registration, and the game is written for adults. There is no federal age rating for card games in the United States, but stores and online platforms set their own rules about what they will carry. The trap here is psychological. Giving your product away feels insane when you have no money. It only worked because the writing was the product, and the writing was good enough to spread on its own. If your free version is boring, then free changes nothing. What this ranks first for is the entry cost. There was no factory, no patent, no ad budget, and no licensed music. They had text, a free file, and other people's money for the first print run. That is the closest thing on this list to something you could start this month. So the pattern is dumb, cheap, early, and shared. Now the person to copy and what she did in week 1. Sara Blakely was selling fax machines door to door in Florida in the late 1990s. She had about $5,000 saved, no fashion training, no investors, and no contacts in manufacturing. She cut the feet off a pair of pantyhose so they would not show under white trousers. That was the entire idea. To save money, she went to a library and researched patent law herself. She drafted her own patent application and paid a lawyer only for the parts she could not do. Then she got in front of a buyer at Neiman Marcus and demonstrated the difference on her own legs in a fitting room. They took it. In 2012, Forbes called her the youngest self-made female billionaire. She started with $5,000 and a pair of scissors. So here is your move this week. Take one small thing that annoys you every day, which is the stupid problem you have stopped noticing. Build the ugliest possible version of a fix today, and use tape if you have to. Then show it to one real person who might pay for it, and ask what they would pay. You do not need a business plan, and you just need a crude object and one conversation. Everyone on this list did that before they had any proof at all. One plain note before you go. This is general information, and it is not financial, tax, or legal advice, so check your own state and city rules before you sell anything. If you want the rest of these breakdowns, then subscribing helps you find them.